We finally got the ending we all knew was coming. The music swells, they kiss, and Belly gets her happy ending. And yet, something still felt off, even for the people who got the ending they wanted. What if I told you that The Summer I Turned Pretty wasn't actually a love story, but a trap the writers built themselves from episode 1? What if the entire plot wasn't about who Belly would choose, but who needed to be chosen the most? In this breakdown, we'll look at how the writers of The Summer I Turned Pretty boxed themselves into a corner they couldn't escape, and how understanding Conrad's Season 3 arc will completely change the way you see the finale. The first question we really have to answer to understand why this season ended the way it did is the one Belly and Conrad fans have been asking since episode 1. Why does Jeremiah get so much screen time? Here's the thing, whether you like it or not, Jeremiah is in fact a main character. He's not a side character, but you guys aren't necessarily crazy for feeling like he should be. There is a reason why, even though he's a main character, his presence might feel so frustrating. When it comes to endgames, the last season is supposed to be the last hurrah. Essentially, it's like their honeymoon, and everything might not be perfect, but they've gotten rid of all the outside noise and they're figuring each other out together. Imagine if you were on your honeymoon and your spouse invited their ex. That's basically what The Summer I Turned Pretty Season 3 feels like. It's like we all know she's going to pick Conrad, and yet Jeremiah is still a constant presence throughout the entire season. By your honeymoon, your final season, you would expect that the endgame couple at the very least knows they want to be with each other and no one else. When you have to drag the love triangle out this far, you have established what essentially feels like a permanent thorn that has overstayed their welcome. The reason why Belly and Conrad feel like they don't get enough screen time is because the show is engineered to always include Jeremiah in their plot. If you guys are claiming that this show is actually the Belly and Conrad love story, well, for 3 seasons, Jeremiah has been a main character in their love story. So instead of the development of the endgame couple, what we have is the continued development of a love triangle and more screen time given to a couple that we all already know is doomed. And don't get me wrong, dragging out the endgame until the final episode isn't new. We've seen other shows do it. In Gossip Girl, for example, we don't see Dan and Serena get together until the final moments. But here's the difference. In those stories, the endgame couple still gets a chance to breathe. At some point in the show, whether it's in previous seasons or the final season itself, we are given time to actually see the endgame couple in an established relationship in real time. In The Summer I Turned Pretty, Belly and Conrad's relationship exists entirely through flashbacks, and half of those flashbacks are negative. By the end of the show, we do not see why Belly and Conrad make sense as a couple. What we know is that they love each other, but we already saw them being in love before and it wasn't enough. They were in love the first time around and it didn't work. Being in love isn't the only factor to a functioning relationship. They have to make sense as a unit. That's what the show should show us. And they only took 1 episode to do it, and that was it. The rest of the season was just them hammering down, they love each other, more telling and not showing. When you wrap the love triangle up before the final season, it feels more rewarding because we're given a chance to see the endgame couple thrive. So if you're a Belly and Conrad fan, before the announcement of the movie, you might have felt slighted and frustrated because you have not gotten a chance to see your ship truly and honestly just be. And so to really satisfy the audience, this movie has to happen because the show fails to give the endgame couple their just due. And that brings us to the bigger issue. Not only do we not get enough development of the endgame couple, but we don't get a truly satisfying ending for the protagonist either. If what Belly wanted all along was to be with Conrad, why did her happy ending still feel like something was missing? Here's the thing, endings don't just appear out of nowhere. Every character story leaves clues, and understanding Conrad's story will change the entire meaning of the finale. Let's look at the final moments of episode 11. When Belly tells Conrad to leave, 5 minutes before the series ends, he's heartbroken, alone, and miserable. There's 5 minutes left in the show and not a single thread of happiness is in his story. There was nothing positive his character took from that moment. And that is how you know exactly where his storyline was headed. There's a simple screenwriting trick to spot where a storyline is going for a character. If everything is seemingly going well, that usually means disaster is coming. But if everything keeps going wrong, that is a sign that the writers are setting them up for one big payoff. In a show like this, every major character has to walk away with something positive. They have to have some sort of happiness. That's just what this genre demands. Conrad needed that ending more than any other character because unlike Belly and Jeremiah, there was no alternative version for him. Belly's sad too, sure, but she still has options. Belly had multiple routes to a happy ending. She could be happy with Conrad, or she could be happy alone. We've seen that Belly can find happiness without either brother. Jeremiah also had a path to happiness with Belly, but he also had an exit ramp, finally letting go and moving on. But Conrad? He was funneled into a dead end. No detour, no breaks, no reverse. Belly can be happy without him. Jeremiah can be happy without Belly. But Conrad cannot be happy without her. That was his entire arc of season 3. That's what the entire season was telling you. He needs her to be happy. And when they're telling you that all season, the only way his arc can end is with her, because they're not going to send one of their main characters off in misery. Conrad is not just going to be sad for the entirety of season 3 and then end the season still being sad. That's just not how they're going to end his story. By episode 11, every single story beat for Conrad was hinging on Belly choosing him, because that was the only silver lining the writers built for him to get. The writers essentially set this story up to where Conrad's happiness does not exist without Belly. If the season ended at this moment, his silence, his setbacks, his grief would have amounted to nothing. Without her, his storyline collapses. So when people ask, why would Belly end her story without seeing her family, her friends? The answer is simple, because the happy ending we saw wasn't hers. If you ask season 3 Belly, what would her dream life be? What does happiness look like for her? It would have included Conrad, absolutely, but it would not include just him. It would have included her family, her friends. This show has shown us that she can find joy in multiple places, not just with one person. But if you ask Conrad the same question, his answer will only be Belly, and the series ends with him and the only person that can make him happy. So what we see in the final scene of this show isn't from Belly's perspective. It's not her dream life. It's not her happy ending. It's Conrad's. And that's where things really start to unravel. Because of what we were building towards all along was Conrad finally getting happiness, why did the endgame still feel so rushed? What if the real reason Belly and Conrad weren't given the space to breathe is because the show never wanted to let them breathe in the first place? I mean, think about it. Why wouldn't the writers just end Belly and Jeremiah earlier? That way we can get the Belly and Conrad love story for season 3 and a movie wouldn't be needed. Because according to Jenny Han, the show doesn't really work like that. Jenny Han's response to fans who complained about Belly and Conrad not having enough time to be in a happy relationship on screen was that their journey wasn't about that. Think about that for a second. The creator of the show is telling you that happiness was not a factor in their love story. Their love story literally was not about them being happy. The truth is, this isn't a story built to explore Belly and Conrad's relationship. From the words of Jenny Han herself, this entire season builds up to Belly and Conrad reuniting. Not Belly and Conrad being a competent couple, not Belly and Conrad resolving their issues, not Belly and Conrad actually making sense together, but them struggling to find their way back to each other. That is what their story is about. This show doesn't want to be the Belly and Conrad love story, and it never has. If this show was actually about their love story, they would have been given the space, the emotional runway, the screen time, but they weren't, because this was never really about who Belly would choose, but delaying that choice for as long as possible. Jenny Han wanted the resolution of this love triangle to stretch out until the end. That's why ending Belly and Jeremiah early would be the antithesis of what this show is built around. And let me make this clear, this story structure isn't a timing issue. The writers chose to pigeonhole themselves. Jenny Han said herself, by season 2, she knew a movie would be needed. She knew this story structure would limit how far her endgame couple would go, and they still did it anyway. And instead of asking for an extra season, which she had the liberty to do, she opted for a movie. Why? Because deep down, I think she knew the truth. And some of you might not like hearing this, but the writers never intended to give you a full season centered around Belly and Conrad because they knew it wouldn't work. From a series format, Belly and Conrad are not strong enough to carry this show week after week.
You need to leave!
And this isn't just me being a Belly and Conrad hater. Neither ship would work as a centerpiece of this show because the show's entertainment hinges so heavily on the love triangle that there's no other strong enough plots to keep people engaged week by week. So if the only plot that actually keeps people engaged is the love triangle, if you take away half of that love triangle, you're taking away half of what makes the show engaging. And the rest of the side plots are not giving you enough to make up for that loss. They have engineered this show completely around the love triangle, so much so that they have to cater to it. They are forced to drag it out. They can't not drag it out. So instead of giving us a story that explores why Belly and Conrad work, they gave us one about almost. almost getting there, almost working out, almost happy, because almost keeps people watching. Almost gives you another episode, another teaser, another trailer. And that's where Conrad's perspective comes into play. The show frames this triangle not only to drag out the tension, but to make us experience that tension primarily through Conrad's eyes. Belly's inner life fades into the background, while Conrad's feelings, his setbacks, his vulnerabilities are front and center. And that's what makes this season so different, because the show that was supposed to be about Belly's coming of age quietly became about Conrad's heartache. And the way that shift reshapes how we feel about Conrad and about every character around him, that's where things really get interesting. And that's what I'm breaking down in my next video.